Hello and welcome to Extra Innings. I am Vann. I am joined tonight by Owen and Adam Glick. We have a lot to talk about on this evening's show as the the non-waiver trade deadline has now come and gone. We will get you guys caught up to speed on all of the trades, and the other thing I would like to say is there will be no prospect roundup. I know that makes Owen sad, but we have a lot to talk about, so we are going to get right into it. Most of the moves I wrote down are reverse chronological order. I don't know if that's really a thing, but we'll make it a thing. From last week, and then as we progress further, we will get to today's moves. We will talk about a lot of the big ones, and if you guys have anything to say, feel free to comment on the moves. We are going to start with the Atlanta Braves trying to win the NL East down the stretch. They acquired Johnny Venters to bolster their bullpen. Let's start with you, Adam. What do you think of this move? How do you think it helps the Braves?
I think he's just a guy that's gone through a lot, and I think he was with the Braves in 2012, and now that he's reunited with them, and it's good to see him back. And I think he's a decent pitcher that can throw strikes, locate his pitches, and he can give them good innings in the bullpen. I wouldn't necessarily trust him in like a key scenario in the playoffs, but he could be like a sixth inning kind of guy for the Braves, and also a long reliever down the stretch. I think it will help them in depth purposes, but he's not, like one of those impact players.
Yes, definitely. You mentioned he's played for the Braves before. He was actually an all-star with the Braves in 2011, I believe. He's undergone 2 Tommy John surgeries and has really fought and clawed his way back to the major leagues. With the Tampa Bay Rays this year, has pitched pretty well. Like Adam said, I wouldn't trust him as an elite-level reliever in a high-leverage postseason situation, but definitely a good piece to add to the Atlanta Braves bullpen. A veteran arm who will locate his pitches well and give the Braves more options in that bullpen. They've got a very young team there, and this was a move I think they didn't have to give up a lot of top prospects for, actually any top prospects for, so a good move for the Braves to try to win the NL East this year. Yes, another move the Braves did to help out their bullpen, I think maybe a more meaningful move that down the stretch for the Braves, is the addition of Brad Brock from the Baltimore Orioles. They, at least in my opinion, had to give up a little more to acquire Brock, but I think Brock can prove to be a better addition for the Braves down the stretch. I think he's a guy you could lean on in the later innings to close out ball games, maybe even for the Braves. Yes, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't he have closing experience when Zach Britton's been out? Hasn't he been the Orioles closer? Or am I thinking of someone else?
No, he has save experience before. I think he has like 30-something or 40-something career saves.
So a guy that you can stick in the back end of the bullpen, 7th, 8th, or 9th inning guy who will give you outs, especially down the stretch, and maybe could close if need be for the Braves. I think this is a good move, bigger than the Johnny Venters move. It'll be at least more impactful to the Atlanta Braves in 2018. Yes, now lots of moves. We'll try to cover as many of them as we can on the show, and
We are going to continue. We're going to stay in the National League East as the Philadelphia Phillies acquired Asdrubal Cabrera from the New York Mets. Cabrera hitting .277 this year with 18 home runs. He is going to be a free agent at the end of the year, so a rental for the Phillies, unless they can manage to re-sign him in the offseason. But for now, the Phillies are looking to compete for a NL East crown. Do you guys have any thoughts about the move?
I like the move. I think he's a veteran guy, and he has still some pop left in his bat, and he's just a good guy to have on your team going down the stretch, and just a guy that's one of the few guys on the Phillies roster that's been in playoff type situations before, and it's exciting for him because he's coming from a Mets team that just lost 25-4 tonight and have been horrible for the last couple of years. And now he's being put into a NL East division race. So I think he's going to be a good thing for the Phillies, and the Phillies need a player like him, and he'll bring in production from behind the plate as well with his bat.
Yes, a great veteran move. The Phillies and Braves, both the teams currently sitting atop the NL East right now, are very young teams and don't have a lot of veterans with playoff experience. Asdrubal Cabrera, adding him gives you a veteran bat that you can bring in. So a good move for the Phillies. Like I mentioned, they're a very young team and don't have a lot of playoff experience on the roster. Asdrubal Cabrera gives them this. So it's a good move, I think, for the Phillies.
Yes, our next move, we're going to head over to the American League East. The Orioles traded their star closer, Zach Britton, to the New York Yankees. Adam, you are a Yankees fan.
Yes.
What do you think of Zach Britton so far, and how do you think he'll help you in the future?
I mean, he adds another elite bullpen arm into our great bullpen already, and I don't know how much he's pitched. I know in his first outing he was perfect. He had an inning as scoreless. I don't know how much he's pitched since. We've kind of had some days off and then some blowout games. But I think he's a good arm, and it makes it really interesting now because we have a bullpen for the playoffs where our starters don't need to go that many innings, and we can still get the win because we have Britton, Robertson, Betances, and Chapman. Also, we have Chad Green. So we have 5 bullpen arms that can get it done to win us a ball game, which conceivably you can only have your starter go all around 5 innings, and you could still win a game. So I think Zach Britton's a big piece. We did give up some good prospects for him, but I think we needed to do that. And he hasn't been his complete self this year, but I think part of that reason just because he's on the Orioles and he doesn't get to pitch a lot because, they're usually giving up 1 million runs a game. So I think it's going to be a good addition for us because that's the strength of the Yankees, even more than our power hitting lineup. It's our bullpen. So I think it adds another elite arm into our bullpen.
Yes, definitely the strength of your team now is the bullpen. Zach Britton just adding to that. I still think the Yankees, they scare me in a postseason series because the offense to me is too boom or bust. If Judge, Stanton, Sanchez are hitting well, then you're going to win. But say they have an off day, they go 0 for 4, then you might be in trouble. But if you get the lead after the 6th or 7th inning, it's like the 2015 Royals. The game is over because you can bring in Betances, Chapman, now Zach Britton into that mix. So if you get a lead in the 6th inning or late in the game, that's scary if you're the opponent to face that Yankees bullpen.
Yes, copying the 2015 Royals, and that with the great bullpen that's proved to work over the years. The price of relievers at the deadline has increased significantly, and those are some of the most important moves, some of the most important reasons as to team success in the playoffs. The Rockies acquired Se-Wan Oh from the Toronto Blue Jays. Se-Wan Oh, I saw a Rockies article claiming that Se-Wan Oh was a elite reliever. I don't know if I would quite go that far as to put him in the elite category. He is certainly one of the best in the game. Owen, my resident Rockies fan, what do you think about Se-Wan Oh so far, and how do you think he'll impact the team?
Well, he's done good so far. He came in tonight with the bases loaded. Rockies were up 6-2. Only allowed one run on a wild pitch, I believe, but he had pitched 2 previous times, 2 scoreless times. He worked out of a jam last night. So two nights in a row he's came in a jam and pitched well, kept the Rockies in baseball games. He had a bit of a down year last year and was signed by Toronto in the offseason and then came to the Rockies obviously now. The price, they didn't have to give up too much for him. Maybe Forrest Wall, former first-round pick, but he's struggled with injuries and is at the AA level now. So you might look back and say that might have been too much, but I don't think so. I think Se-Wan Oh will give you what the Rockies needed to do at this deadline, which was get a relief pitcher, and that they did. So now you have Se-Wan Oh, Adam Ottavino, Scott Oberg, and Wade Davis, who are all good relief pitchers. It's not as good as the Yankees bullpen, mind you, but it's pretty darn good. The Rockies, there were a lot of national writers that said they needed to get a corner outfielder, but really their biggest need was in the bullpen, and they definitely addressed that. Seems like Rockies fans were disappointed this deadline day that they didn't make another move, but I think Se-Wan Oh is enough once you get some other pieces of your team healthy to compete for a playoff spot, and obviously Rockies fans hope they end up playing in October.
Yes, I would agree with a lot of what you just said. I think David Dahl returning from injury can sort of act as the trade deadline acquisition. He hasn't played for much of the year. And if he performs up to his expectations, I think the Rockies will be just fine in terms of the corner outfield position. And even if they were to go forward without David Dahl, with Gerardo Parra and Cargo, I think you'd be fine. I'm sort of skipping around here. There's no real scheme to my madness. But the Yankees did not just add bullpen help. They added J. A. from the Blue Jays as a starting pitcher who is phenomenal in his first outing with the Yankees. Adam, what can you tell us about J. Happ?
He's a veteran, 35-year-old guy, was on the All-Star team this year for the first time, actually closed the game. He has really good stuff. He knows how to win, and I think it's a good addition for the Yankees. Now, his health is in question. I think he should be fine. He has some kid virus disease, but hopefully he'll be okay. But I like the move a lot. I think the Yankees needed multiple starters at this deadline. they got 2 starters. They might have needed one more elite kind of pitcher, but I'll take it at this point. Hap's a pretty good pitcher, and he's not gonna do too much. He knows how to pitch against big lineups because his stuff is not stellar, but he can locate his pitches and he can keep the pitch count down so he can go in the later innings. In his first start, I think he went 6 2/3 or something. He only gave up 1 run on a solo home run from Salvador Perez. He was really sharp, and he even admitted that he was nervous pitching for the Yankees at Yankee Stadium. There's a lot of pressure, but I think the Yankees need a guy like that heading into the postseason because other than Severino, they have a lot of question marks for starting pitching. So I like the move a lot.
Yes, if there's going to be a downfall of the Yankees, so to speak, this year, I would have to say it would be because of that starting rotation. We'll see if they have done enough come October. We are now going to transition to the NL Central side of things, where a few teams were wheeling and dealing on deadline day. But we start on July 27th, which is when the Brewers acquired Mike Moustakas from the Kansas City Royals. The Brewers later went and acquired Jonathan Scope from the Orioles, which now means you have 4 infielders for 3 spots. We were talking about this a little bit beforehand. Adam, you told me Mike Moustakas does not belong on the Brewers. Could you explain your reasoning?
Yeah, I just don't think he's necessary for the Brewers team. And he's kind of a liability in the field. And Scope is a stellar infielder. I mean, his bat has kind of come along with how well he plays defense. So, and it's kind of tough too because Travis Shaw is he's a solid defender, and he has tremendous power. So you're kind of in a bind now that you have Moustakas and you're the Brewers. So you're an NL team, so there's no DH position for Moustakas. So it's a tough situation. They're going to have to kind of pick and choose. I don't know if you can play all 3 of them at once. Maybe it's a good problem to have because you can play whoever's doing well. But we'll see how it works. The Brewers, though, I like the Brewers lineup a lot. My question with them just remains their pitching. I know it's done great this year. It's just like, my question is how and can it maintain down the stretch heading into the postseason. But I think it's going to be an interesting dilemma for the Brewers, but it could end up being a good dilemma. So we'll see how that works out.
Yes, we will see. Owen, you have been really high on the Brewers all year. You've always been a big fan of them. You predicted them to win the NL Central, and you stuck by that prediction a few weeks ago. Are you going to change your prediction now?
No, I see no reason to change my prediction now. This is a team I've believed in from the beginning. The additions of Christian Yelich and Lorenzo Cain in the offseason, as well as Jesus Aguilar's sort of breakout year this year, the Aguilar story is one I didn't expect. The pitching, I would have liked to see them go out and get a starting pitcher at the deadline. One that is postseason experience. And they didn't exactly do that. Like Adam was just explaining, the Moustakas situation, how they're going to get them all playing time is interesting. But it could be a good problem to have. Lots of good hitters in the lineup. And the pitching staff has been able to hold up obviously good enough to hang with the Cubs in that NL Central. The pitching, especially the starting rotation, Jolie Chastain is listed as their number 2 starter on the team's depth chart, and that scares me a little bit once you get into the postseason because none of them have postseason experience. Chase Anderson, Jolie Chastain, Wade Miley, Jay Guerrera. Actually, he was their opening day starter last year. Guerrera?
Yes, he was.
Junior Guerrera, that's his name. I was drawing a blank. But none of these guys have postseason experience. I would have liked to see him get a starter with postseason experience. But maybe the Brewers are happy with that staff that they have and think that they can get the job done. So we will find out. This is a team, the reason I liked them, they were close last year before falling off in August and September. And I love the additions of Yelich and Lorenzo Cain. And now you've got Moustakas and Scope to put in there. So I still have to stand by them as my pick to win the NL Central.
Yes, the Cubs, I would argue, would not like that pick as they went out and improved their team, at least on paper, by a considerable amount. They acquired relief pitcher Brandon Kintzler from the Washington Nationals, the second straight deadline year that Kintzler has been traded. A interesting deal for the Nationals. They seem to have sat and done nothing, although they did trade away Brandon Kintzler, I think. They kind of wanted to get a little bit in return without losing a whole lot of the current year's team, and they wanted to get some prospects for the future. But Brandon Kintzler should help solidify the back end of the Cubs bullpen, which is going to be a very tough bullpen to face, and in a very interesting National League where no team has really separated themselves from the pack. Adam, do you like Brandon Kintzler going to the Cubs? Do you think that he's the piece that the Cubs need to win the NL?
Well, I don't like the Cubs, but he's a good piece. He probably is an arm that they needed. Their bullpen's actually been pretty good this year. Edwards Jr. and Morrow are good bullpen arms that they have at the back end. Kintzler adds another kind of veteran arm. He's been there before, and he's been dealt to contenders, and I think he could help them out in the 7th or 8th inning. And the Cubs are still my pick to win the division just because they have the more veteran experience than the Brewers do. And frankly, I just don't trust the Brewers. I like the Brewers way more than the Cubs, but I just don't think the Brewers have what it takes to win the division. And Cubs have been playing really good baseball, and that lineup is really good. Kintzler, I don't think Kintzler is like the guy that they got, and now you say, oh my God, they're definitely going to win now. But I think he could help the Cubs just in the late innings out of the bullpen. But he's not over the top guy where you say it's now the Cubs are for sure going to win the division.
Yes, I would agree with you. I think they are my pick to win the division as well. But we are going to move to maybe the most interesting race I don't know if it's the most interesting race, but maybe the most popular race, the one that everybody wants to hear about, and that is, of course, the Yankees and the Red Sox. The Yankees currently are they 6 games back right now?
Well, they're 5 now.
5 games back.
Because we won and they lost.
Yes, 5 games.
We're trying desperately to keep it a race, but it's hard.
Yes, let's go over the Red Sox moves first, and then I'll get to asking all of my questions. The Red Sox acquired Ian Kinsler from the Los Angeles Angels. I heard that this may be the move of the entire trade deadline. I don't know if I would go quite that far, but I think it certainly should help the Boston Red Sox. What else did the Red Sox do?
They acquired...
They got Eovaldi.
Yeah, I was going to say, starting pitcher, Nate Eovaldi. I like the Ian Kinsler move as well. It looks like Pedroia is going to be out for the entire year. They need a second baseman. I like Kinsler's bat in Fenway Park. I think it plays well there. And then Nate Eovaldi, obviously more starting pitching depth. They're a club that has very good offense and a good bullpen. And like Adam Glick just mentioned, the Yankees are trying to keep it a race, but it's hard when the Red Sox seemingly win every day. Seems like that team never loses. At least that's what it seems like to me.
Yeah.
But the Nate Eovaldi move is a good one to add starting pitching depth. He's not going to be your 1 or 2 starter. Maybe a good 3 or 4 starter. Actually, where does he sit in the rotation? He's supposed to start on Saturday or Sunday, something like that against
I think he's their 4th starter.
4 starter?
I think,
That would make sense.
Yeah, he was scheduled for Was he scheduled for Sunday? Or he was scheduled for Saturday. He might be
Saturday.
ahead of Price right now, because I know they planned it so Pomeranz wouldn't pitch against the Yankees.
Yes, Nathan Eovaldi is actually listed currently as the 3 starter, but that is because Chris Sale went on the 10-day disabled list today. The Red Sox also have Stephen Wright on the DL and Eduardo Rodriguez on the DL as well. So their starting pitching is a little depleted right now. But it is very deep, as players with Major League experience, Drew Pomeranz and Brian Johnson, are pitching for the team. And it really doesn't matter because the offense is so good, but they continue to win regardless of who pitches. We now move to the American League West, where really the only team I think that made a significant move was the Houston Astros, acquiring Roberto Osuna from the Blue Jays. However, Roberto Osuna cannot pitch as he is serving his 75-game suspension for domestic violence. And he's actually going to appear in court tomorrow. So we'll see how soon the Astros get Roberto Osuna on a Major League mound. But the interesting part of this deal, I think, was that they sent Ken Giles, their closer from last year and part of this year, to the Toronto Blue Jays. And Ken Giles is currently in the minor leagues after struggles on the mound this year and a little outburst at A.J. Hinch. The Astros decided they didn't want him in town.
This is interesting to me. This is one of the more interesting moves of the trade deadline. Ken Giles was the Astros closer last year, and even this year, at times he's looked great and like one of the elite relievers in all of baseball, and at times he has looked awful. And when he looks awful. He tends to blow up in the dugout, or in the latest incident at manager A.J. Hinch, which is part of the reason he got sent down and probably traded too. The Astros don't want a guy like that in their clubhouse. Ken Giles now will go to the Blue Jays. Not sure where he'll fit in that bullpen, but I would guess he would get another shot at the major leagues this year, whether as the Blue Jays closer or as a 7th or 8th inning reliever remains to be seen. And Roberto Osuna, despite being suspended, he's actually eligible for the postseason. I don't think the Astros would have made this move if he was not eligible for the postseason. So that's an interesting move, or an interesting part of this trade, is that Osuna is in fact eligible to pitch in the postseason when the Astros get there.
Yeah. I just want to add that it's one of the most interesting moves of the deadline just because it has so many aspects to it. You send your former closer, Giles, who you think is part of your team and part of your, World Series campaign team from last year. You send him to Toronto. You get Ozuna, who has a ton of talent. He's 23 years old, but he's serving a domestic violence charge, and his court case is tomorrow, so you don't even know the verdict yet of the decision before you already traded for him, and you kind of bring this distraction for your team, and it's not a good distraction. And A.J. Hinch said that he already had to have a meeting with his players to accept Ozuna onto this team once he gets cleared to play. And then the last interesting thing, which I don't know if you should change, but it's just interesting to me. You can take steroids and get suspended, and you can't play in the postseason. But you can physically abuse someone, and you could still play in the postseason. So that kind of doesn't make sense to me, but we're not going to get into that. But it's just a weird move for the Astros because pretty much everything's going right for them right now. And this year, I mean, they've kind of cruised through the season, and just this move has some question marks, and hopefully it works out for them, but it could have the effect where it turns into a disaster, and that's what worries me with this trade with the Astros. But hopefully Ozuna will be free, learn from this, and do well in the Astros uniform. But we'll see what happens from here.
Yes, we will see indeed. We have a few more moves to get to, actually quite a lot, so we're going to try to go through these fairly quickly. We are going to head to the National League East, where the Philadelphia Phillies acquired all-star catcher Wilson Ramos. And Aaron Lope from the Toronto Blue Jays. And, of course, Wilson Ramos from the Tampa Bay Rays. But the Phillies trying to add some veteran pieces to the team. Adding a catcher is definitely a good move, but the question with adding a catcher is how does he develop chemistry with the pitching staff this late into the season last year. Jonathan Lucroy was traded to the Rockies as all-star catcher, and the pitchers seem to be fine with it, so we'll see if the Phillies pitchers adjust the same way to the addition of Wilson Ramos. And part of it, though, with Wilson Ramos is his bat. He's made the All-Star game because of his bat. He is in the lineup every day because of his bat. One of the better hitting catchers in all of Major League Baseball. So if there's a reason the Phillies will be able to stay on top and defend against the Braves and the Nationals, I think it'll be because of Wilson Ramos and the veteran catching presence in the clubhouse.
Yes, it's always interesting when you bring in a catcher at the trade deadline because you don't know how he'll be able to work with your pitchers. which is the most important aspect as a catcher, I believe, and defensively. And you look at Wilson Ramos, he's got a great bat for a catcher. Part of the reason he was selected as the fans' vote to start the All-Star game before getting injured. But an All-Star catcher nonetheless, and a good bat. You look at Jorge Alfaro, who had been catching for the Phillies, had struggled this year. He'd been hitting better recently, but they wanted to go to make a move, get a bat behind the plate. So the big question is, will he be able to adjust to that pitching staff? A lot of young pitchers in Philadelphia. Jake Arrieta might be the exception, but other than that, lots of young arms for Wilson Ramos to get acquainted with quickly as we near very meaningful baseball games in August and September.
Yes. The other Pennsylvania team was busy making deals as well on the non-waiver trade deadline day of July 31st. Currently, the Pittsburgh Pirates sit in third place of the NL Central, 6 games out of the division. Yet, they decided to deal for Rays ace Chris Archer and gave up two of the biggest prospects in any deal this trade deadline. Tyler Glasnow, a pitcher in the Pirates organization, and Austin Meadows, an outfielder who has seen time at the big league level and has performed well when given that time. So my question to you, Adam and Owen, Adam, you can answer first, is what are the Pirates thinking?
I mean, they're basically saying that they're all in right now for the season, and they obviously thought that Archer he's an a really elite pitcher, because they gave up two really good prospects. I mean, Meadows is a really good prospect. Glasnow's another good prospect. And the player to be named later, according to sources, I mean, they say he's a real asset, so so they're getting three really good prospects for Archer, who, frankly, has been up and down. I know it's the American League, so it's a little tougher to pitch. You're facing the Yankees and Red Sox a lot, but it's going to be interesting. But I think it could work for the Pirates right now. I mean, they're riding momentum as much as they can, trying to find a way to make it to the postseason. Archer find himself in Pittsburgh. It would be a sight to see, and I hope he does great there, but I think Tampa Bay should be really happy, and I love the direction Tampa Bay is going. They have a really bright future, and they're not even bad this year. They're over 500 right now, so I think it's a good deal for both teams. Pittsburgh did give up too much for Archer, but they needed to do something at the deadline, so I like the move for both teams, and I think it will be beneficial for both teams as well.
Yes, something I guess is better than doing nothing. They did give up too much, in my opinion. Chris Archer, though, is under club control until 2021. So 3 more years of Chris Archer in Pittsburgh. They think he can be a front-of-the-rotation starter, an ace maybe, for the Pittsburgh Pirates, and potentially maybe sneak them into contention this year and next year. But I wonder why they would want to give up, and obviously they don't want to give up their top prospects, but why they would give up their top prospects and mortgage maybe their future. Glasnow's an elite pitching prospect, and Austin Meadows has been hitting well at the major league level, actually, this year. So Tampa Bay continuing to acquire prospects, and like Glick mentioned, they're not your usual sellers. They're above 500, but they do have a bright future, and now it gets even brighter with the additions of Austin Meadows and Tyler Glasnow.
Yes, the other thing that the Rays did was they went out and they acquired Tommy Pham from the St. Louis Cardinals. And at first I was a bit confused by this move, but the more I think about it, the more it makes sense to me. Kind of a buy low, sell high type of deal. Tommy Pham, one of the best hitters in the Cardinals lineup the past few years, has really struggled since April of this year. The Rays did not have to give up a lot to get him. If he can turn it around in the American League, maybe with a change of scenery, he could, next year at this time, or maybe even as soon as next offseason, the Rays could be looking at quite a nice return for Tommy Pham.
Yes, Tommy Pham is a guy some people thought coming into this year could be a 30-30 guy, 30 home runs, 30 stolen bases. Doesn't look like that's going to be the case. He's struggled since April. April he came out on fire to begin the season, but since then has struggled mightily at the plate. Maybe going to Tampa Bay, he'll be able to turn it around and turn into a quality outfielder. He emerged as a really good hitter last year for the St. Louis Cardinals. And the Cardinals have a surplus of outfielders, it seems like. They've got some young guys. Tyler O'Neill came up today. Harrison Bader has played well for the St. Louis Cardinals in the outfield. And then that's taken away at bats from some guys, including Dexter Fowler, who was a mainstay in that outfield who you thought you could pencil in every day. Well, not so fast. He has struggled this year. Tommy Pham has struggled this year. And it's given opportunities to guys like Tyler O'Neill and Harrison Bader, and they've played well when they've been given the opportunity. So the Cardinals decided to get rid of Tommy Pham.
Yes, now we will move on to the last set of deals. I've kind of been going by division, if you haven't picked up on that already. Sort of been skipping around, just looking down my list. But now we make it to the NL West, where a few teams had really busy deadlines. The Diamondbacks and the Dodgers. The Arizona Diamondbacks, top 4 bullpen in baseball, added to that bullpen at the trade deadline by acquiring Brad Ziegler from the Miami Marlins, as well as Jake Diekman. So, 2 bullpen arms for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Adam, what were your thoughts on the Diamondbacks trade deadline?
I thought it was a really productive trade deadline for the D-backs. They're kind of going more of the bullpen route, like the Yankees, which I like a lot. They're kind of bolstering around their bullpen because their lineup's really solid. Starting pitching's pretty good. In the market this year, there weren't a lot of big names. There weren't a lot of great starters. So a lot of people went out and got bullpen arms, and there were not a lot of big-name bullpen arms, but they're solid bullpen pitchers, especially the ones they got, Ziegler and Diekman. Both solid. I believe both of them are left-handers, which is huge in a playoff-type scenario against left-handed hitting. And I think Diamondbacks are trying to win the division. They're trying to somehow stay with the Dodgers and beat them out at I love the moves for the D-backs. The Dodgers are still better, but the D-backs have a really good bullpen already. They added to it today, and it should be interesting to see if the Diamondbacks can make the playoffs with the roster that they have.
Yes, the other move the Diamondbacks made was they acquired Eduardo Escobar to play a little infield for the D-backs. So another interesting move, another addition to the D-backs team. We now move to the Los Angeles Dodgers, currently half a game up on both the Rockies and the Diamondbacks. At the deadline, the Los Angeles Dodgers acquired Brian Dozier and John Axford. They acquired Brian Dozier to play the infield, acquired him from the Minnesota Twins, and they acquired John Axford to bolster the bullpen, and they acquired him from the Toronto Blue Jays. Owen, what are your thoughts about the Dodgers acquiring Brian Dozier and John Axford?
The Dodgers, the Brian Dozier one to me is good because, well, it seems like they've got unlimited spots on their 25-man roster. Or they just have players that can play everywhere. Kike Hernandez is a guy like that. Chris Taylor can play a lot of places. Brian Dozier comes in, maybe solidifies that second base position. And the John Axford deal gives them more depth. You see, it's a common theme on deadline day, or at least it has been the past few years. Teams acquiring depth in the bullpen because you need that come September and October. He's not going to be one of their 7th or 8th or 9th inning guys. They've already got some good ones. But, again, depth is important. Not wearing out your bullpen is important. You can't have Kenley Jansen pitch every day. You're going to need quality pitchers who you can count on to get you outs in September, in October, that can get you to the postseason, and like the Dodgers did last year, get to the World Series. So a good move, not a blockbuster deal by any means, not an elite reliever, but just a good depth move for the Dodgers, I think.
Yes, I think this may be the deal the Brian Dozier deal, maybe the deal that puts the Dodgers over the top and solidifies their spot as potential NL West champions. I think they can run away with the division, sort of like they did last year, get hot in August. So I think if you're a Dodger fan, things are looking good for you down the stretch. Adam, did you have any thoughts about the Dodgers deadline?
I thought it was sadly successful for them. I mean, I can't stand them either, but they're in a really good spot. They have unlimited amount of leeway when it comes to position players. They have a lot of options now because you can move Bellinger back into the outfield where he actually excels. You can put Muncy at first where he belongs. He's earned that spot this year. You can put Dozier at second. You have Manny at short right now. Turner, when he comes back, goes to third, and then Chris Taylor. He's a guy to come off the bench, pinch run, or play in the inning, or in the outfield, or in the infield for an inning or two. They just have a lot of options now, and they're definitely the team in the NL where if there's going to be a team that's going to run away with it, it's going to be them. But right now, until they get hot, they're still like every other NL team, trying to make the playoffs and trying to get hot. No team has really gotten hot in the NL. You've had kind of stretches here and there, but no team's kind of pulled away from the pack. The Cubs and the Dodgers are the two teams that can, but they still haven't yet. But the Dodgers deadline moves, also getting Axford out of the bullpen, because I wouldn't say their bullpen's weak. It's just not as trustworthy or confident as some other bullpens are for playoff contenders, but they're in a good spot, and if they get hot, they'll run away with this division.
Yes, I think we are all in agreement there. So that will wrap up the show unless either of you guys have any more thoughts. Owen, any more deadline thoughts?
No.
Adam, any more deadline thoughts?
No.
All right, so that will do it for the trade deadline edition of Extra Innings. We would like to thank you for listening whenever and however. We will be back next week, hopefully with a live...
No, we won't. We'll be at camp.
Oh, right. Next week is sports broadcasting camp, so we will not be back. Next week we have the big live shows. Make sure you tune into those right here on National Sports Radio. Every single night we do a live show with all the National Sports members. So make sure you tune in to that. But we will be back in 2 weeks at the same time, same place, 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific on National Sports Radio. You have been listening to Extra Innings on National Sports Radio.